interracial relationships, family dynamics, Asian and white. Really interesting topic. Welcome in. Much love. Trav here. It's something that I realized people were interested in and people have asked me to talk about. I made a couple videos about how to succeed as an Asian male in the West and Asian masculinity outside of Asia in the white man's world, basically, or white person's world. And those were popular. I thought it was a useful thing to do because it was a challenge for me and something that I wanted to share, and it got some attention and some good feedback. So we're going to continue on that and talk about Asian relationships and family dynamics and share with you some ideas I have for if you have an Asian white family, how to make that work and succeed. And those of you who are doing interracial dating, some thoughts on that. So, I mean, for me, I'm from an Asian white family, which makes me mixed race, but I appear to random white people as being Asian. I don't necessarily appear as being full Asian to Asian people. I've been to Asia. I don't really look Asian there. I look different, right? So by necessity, all my relationships have been interracial for the most part. With white women, it looks interracial. Even with Asian women, it is interracial. Even with other Hapa mixed, they may appear white, I may appear Asian, or with African mixture. So as a result, I've experienced that, and there's more and more of this in the world. People who want to, it's become more normal, it's become less stigmatized, it's become more acceptable, and I think that it's even like a virtue signaling thing at times now. Like, look how progressive I am, that I can. I don't want to doubt, and that's usually not the case, but I think that there's some influence there. And I have a few general thoughts before we go specifically into the Asian white thing. And one is, people are tribal and a little bit racist, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. When we say that someone's racist, we're not necessarily mad about it or think that it's unnatural or weird or that they have to change. People have preferences to stay within their tribe, and that's totally cool. On the other hand, people are people, and we develop feelings for people often regardless of how they look or their background. And if that happens, it's going to happen, and if that's cool, it's cool. And it's fine, and it doesn't even necessarily need to be a topic of discussion. It hasn't been for me, oh, you're Asian, oh, you're white, or oh, you're mixed, or oh, you're black, or, those conversations don't have to happen ever. It's not, most of us are not really racially fixated, and at least in my experience, I can't be, and it's not a thing. There are a few issues, and one is that, like, parents may react in a certain way. Usually, sometimes they do actually, and you just have to get them to understand. Mine don't, so I don't know the experience, but from what I've heard, you just got to get them to understand that you're, it just, come on. Don't be, I understand you're racist, but don't, respect my decision here, right? Another issue is friend groups. Like, people really congregate. It's not segregation. Groups of Asians roll together, groups of whites roll together. So a lot of the time, you'll have the one Asian with all the white people, or the one white person with all the Asian. And if you can feel like an outsider or feel different, but I think it's possible to just try to remember that we're all humans here and that it'll be okay. And people don't necessarily need to mention it. Or people won't necessarily mention it. And if they do, bring that up. But also it's becoming more normal, but it will also never be totally normal just because of the way people play out. So let's move on and talk about Asian-white relationships, because I know that, or Asian-European is a better way of putting things, because, white isn't really descriptive of what's going on here. People from Europe and people from Asia. There's a racial clash. There's a culture clash, and I know a lot of you are here for this. And in order to really understand this, and this is also why I'm not speaking on relationships outside of this as much, you have to understand the history here, because there may be some resentment, and people. I'm going to continue moving up here, blocking some people's path. There may be some resentment that you should be aware of, because it can cause you problems later on, to help you understand where people are coming from. And another resource, if you want to check this out, is on Instagram. There's an Instagrammer named Eurasian, or Proud Eurasian, who talks about this. Proud Eurasian comes across as very resentful and race baiting at times. And I think that if we talk about this, you'll understand why, and it's okay. But the content on there is interesting, and it's worth checking out, so you understand. But we look back at the history, and this is important to know. So, dynamic of Asians and whites in Asia. Especially in America. I don't know too much about in Asia. I haven't spent that much time there, but the first wave of Asians. It's cold as fuck, and I'm hiking up a hill right here. The first wave of Asians to America were all men that came over as laborers, coolies, work on railroads and stuff like that. Okay? So you have a bunch of Asian men coming over. At the same time, there were miscegenation laws that prevented Asian men, prevented interracial marriage. So it's illegal for an Asian man to take a white wife. Maybe they could normally, but it's illegal. It's against the law. Also at the same time, or some of this time, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Chinese Exclusion Act made it heavily limited, the number of new Asians that could come across, Chinese. So as a result, you have a lot of Chinese men who are legally not allowed to take a wife because of the miscegenation laws and the laws on immigration. At the same time, you have the Europeans, the whites, going to Europe for whether it's the British coming into Hong Kong, or whether it's the sorry, just distracted for a moment here, or whether it's going to Vietnam and coming back with war brides. So you have this situation where it's mostly Asian men in the States that are illegally and controlled, disbarred from having wives, and then a lot of the Asian women were forcefully taken here by soldiers. So you have this weird dynamic where, and you can understand why this would cause a lot of resentment, right? It would cause a lot of resentment, and it has. There's because of this, there can be a lot of resentment from Asian men towards white men. And it doesn't stop there, because you also, that's the history of how it started, but this sexual control of Asian men has been maintained through the media, basically putting Asian men that they show in the worst possible light, worst possible emasculated situation, not showing them sexualized or with wives or kids and stuff like that. So the media has been maintaining this. And then there's also certain laws that controlled it, like the San Francisco pigtail laws, that a lot of the Chinese men had these cues that were, phallic basically in nature, part of their masculinity and sexuality, and they're legally required to cut them off by white men. So that's why there's going to be a lot of resentment there. But what's interesting is that we've seen, as things have opened up to immigration, the racial dynamic hasn't changed too much. In that it became the norm to have these single Asian men and Asian women with white husbands, European husbands, because of the force of the military and the force of the government and the laws, right? However, that didn't necessarily change, where Asian women, a lot of the time, white worship is a thing that Proud Eurasian talks about. A lot of Asian women, and I've heard this, like Asian women, like, I'm not attracted to Asian men. A lot of Asian women have continued that tradition. So there's also some resentment between Asian men and Asian women as a result of that. But not necessarily, trying to get out of here, from Asian men and white women, right? So we'll talk about two types of relationships here. Asian man, white woman, white man, Asian woman. I think the Asian man, white woman relationship has the least resentment in it. And my opinion, and we're going to talk about how to manage this, because I don't want people to just be in the worst positions, but it's much more manageable for the kids, especially the mixed sons of Asian men and white women. And the reason why is these sons have a model of masculinity to follow. Like my dad here with my mom, and I know that race doesn't really matter because of this, and I know that an Asian man can succeed and is attractive to whoever, and I know I have these Asian masculine values and virtues of hard work and persistence and physical prowess and athleticism, and it's just not too hard for the I can't speak on the daughters because I haven't experienced that, right? So that, to me, those relationships, and there's speculation like that that these are less common. Historically, they have been less common because that was outlawed, right? Whereas the other one was enforced by the military and the government, right? So it's been less common. It's been maintained to be less common because of the status quo continues to be the status quo, but it also is a healthier relationship because it's a relationship that happens in spite of these weird dynamics. It's a relationship that happens, and then especially the sons of this relationship are prepared to try to succeed in a white world where they're seen as Asian and different. I did want to speak on, I haven't experienced this, but I've seen it. I've heard other people speak on it. I've seen a lot of things. I have friends, and it's not impossible, but when you have the white male, Asian female relationship, and you have sons from that relationship, and I have advice for you especially to the white men, if you don't want to have really fucked up sons who are very resentful and grow up to be like Elliot Rodgers and freak out and shoot up a bunch of white people. You're a white man, right? Your sons are not, you have to think about this in advance, your sons are not going to be viewed by society as white. They're going to be viewed as society by Asian men. So if you don't have a good view of Asian masculinity, you're going to set up for your sons to fail. If you haven't researched Asian masculinity, you're going to set up for your sons to fail. You can't necessarily even do it alone. You have to point your kids to Bruce Lee and stuff like that, and introduce them if possible to your wife's grandfather, and get them introduced to their Asian masculine lineage, because you can't necessarily do it yourself, because you aren't the model of success for them, right? You aren't that. You just aren't, right? So if you're not prepared for that, and if you don't have the respect, you're bringing them into this situation where they are this product of war brides and sexual crimes against them, and they may even see you as part of that, and that will cause a lot of resentment and a lot of difficulties for them to succeed, in society, where they are seen as an Asian male and they have zero guidance from any Asian males who have succeeded. So my advice to you, if you're in that relationship, is to think about it before you proceed towards that, and also to do some research on that, and examine where your values are. Because again, if you like Asian women but don't have a good view of Asian men, then you're going to make a really shitty parent to your sons, and cause more problems than you're adding. But if you are producing children from an Asian male, white female, I think there's a lot less advice needed to be given, because again, that communion is happening despite of all these forces, these negative forces, and just the act of it is kind of revolutionary, and your children born from it have this model of success ready to go. So that's family. You know, we couldn't talk Asian-European relationships without going into what's going to happen with the offspring, because that will happen in a lot of, not every relationship is going to lead towards that, but over the long term, yeah, that's going to happen. So I hope you find that useful. And again, generally, people are people and are going to like who they're going to like. But it's good to know the history and what's going on, so you can understand where the dynamic comes from, where certain resentments come from, how to handle and resolve those. So hope you find that useful as well as interesting. I appreciate you. Let me know what you think. If you want me to talk more in depth on this and make more videos on this topic, then I will, although I don't want my channel to be a whole race baiting thing. I thought that this would be worth doing because I have experienced this. I come from this. It's been requested, and there's more and more interracial relationships have been normalized and legalized and allowed now. So hope this was helpful for you, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say in the comments. Peace.